Exam Prep, CAT and MBA YouTube channel. And watch serial 99 percentilers teaching you the tips and tricks.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. Oh, this took me by surprise. I did not know I was live already. How are you guys today? Very good morning. I hope you can hear and see me clearly. Good morning, everybody. Hi, Dia. Yes, absolutely visible and audible. Dia, I have a gift for you. Good morning, Anuja, Disha. So yes, now I'm clearly audible and visible. All right. So my name is Alpa Sharma, and this is yet another session of our editorial analysis. And I have picked up the article that Dia had suggested in the last class from the Aeon. I'm absolutely good. Prads, I had read your comment under my previous class. The screen is really small. You need to enlarge it maybe from your own PC or laptop or wherever you're watching it from. Okay. All right. So back to it, Prats. I had read your comment under the last video and I just could not reply to it. I'll reply to it after the class ends. Okay. So yes, now back to it. I've brought an Aeon article that Dia had suggested in the last class and we're going to stick to it. Dia, who is Dia? Dia is the grey smoke. Good morning, Om. And that's what we're going to be doing today. So one article as usual. Thursdays we take up an article from the Aeon. So it's the day for Aeon article and that's what we're going to be bringing today. An article that talks about art, an article that talks about mental health, psychology, inclination, many things. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. All these topics are favorites of CAT. They love covering up these topics. So finding one article that covers up all these topics is a win-win for us. Vocabulary, not much. Probably only 3 words to do. So article is very simply written. Very simple. Yet a very interesting read. Something that will force you to think a lot. Good morning, everyone who joined me just now. So, and we'll be discussing the tone, the summary, and many inferences questions. That's what we're going to be doing in the class today. I tried to make the article very concise, but it was very difficult for me because there were so many pointers coming in that I could not alter a lot of paragraphs. So, my one suggestion before I show you the article today, please skim through the article when I show you the article. Don't read every line. Anticipate what the author is trying to say and read a few lines, leave a few lines. That's what is expected out of you. Good morning, Abhilasha and Maitrey. Good morning, Amrit. So that's what we're going to be doing in the class today. Let's start with the vocabulary, everyone. The only slide that we have for vocabulary. Tenacious is sticking to something, getting hold of it very strongly, clinging to it, and not letting it go. So a tenacious grip, a very strong one, and you're just not letting it go is a tenacious grip. It could be a physical grip, it could be a contextual grip as well. So just clinging on to something, holding on to it very tightly and not ready to let go of it is tenacious. Okay, tenacity is a related word to it. Yes, it is. All right. So the next word we have is inundates. Inundate is when you get a lot of feelings together and you're unable to deal. So kids usually, 3 years, 4 years, when they see many people coming in, they get cranky. Why do they get cranky? Because there are so many feelings that they're overwhelmed with. That overwhelming feeling is inundation. We've been inundated with complaints from listeners because there are so many complaints. You're nervous and you're anxious and you're sad. Many feelings coming together, making you overwhelmed is inundates. Do you get the idea of what is overwhelming, everyone? Yeah, do you? Okay, great. Yes, overwhelming. Overflow of emotions. Yes, exactly. The last word is heuristic. Heuristic is when you're involving in serving an aid to learning, discovery, or problem solving by experimental and learning trial and error method. I'll explain that in a gist. When you ask somebody to learn on the job, that's a heuristic approach. Not by giving theory, but by practical usage, getting into the task, learning through participating into the task is heuristic. A hands-on or interactive heuristic approach to learning, hands-on, that is you are doing it yourself. That's how you're learning it. Cooking, for example, is better with heuristic approach. You learn it by participating into it and not merely by looking into recipe books and knowing the recipe by heart. That's not how you learn cooking. So heuristic approach is hands-on, on-the-job training. Okay, that's the only last word and the only slide that we have today. Only 3 words that are tricky that you need to know the meaning of. Everything else I believe is easy. If at any moment you don't get any word in the passage, please ask me a question then and there. Okay, so before I show you the article today, a few things. Meet our unstoppables, our toppers. We have Prathamesh, Ashish, Vishwanath, few of the many kids whom we've trained and who have landed up in the best of IIMs. If you wish to be one of them, enroll yourself right away for the CAT 22 comprehensive program, where you will be trained under the serial 99 100 percentilers. Look no further, speak to our counselors on the number that's given under my video in the scroll bar. Speak right away, enroll right away, do not be late. Shall we start our article, everyone? Ready? A very interesting piece. The myth of mad genius. Now he says myth. That means it's a story that's not true. So he's going to possibly criticize something with a negative connotation. And mad is given in inverted commas. So he says a genius who is mad. Can a genius be mad? Have you heard of stories of people who were genius but who used to act in a crazy way? I'm sure you've heard stories about Newton. Yes. Have you heard of stories about other people as well who were genius, yet people used to call them mad? Tell me if you have. Because there's a correlation between being mad. Mad as a word can be any psychological flaw you might have according to normal standards, or any psychological suffering you might deal with. So mad is actually an offensive. Yeah, Einstein, exactly. I'm sure you must have heard of he being crazy, acting crazily. Now see guys, please do not be offended with the word mad, because mad here is a layman term used for people who are suffering from any psychological disorder, and it's an offensive term. We can't call somebody mad if he suffers from a psychological disorder, but mad is a layman term and that's how he addresses it. Okay. Oh yes, Amrit, I will buy your point. After the entire Twitter saga that has happened, I will certainly buy your point. But will you call him a genius? That's my question. Probably because he's making a lot of money, you can call him a genius. But is he a genius mathematically, scientifically, in terms of art? None. I am sure you buy my point here. Okay. So, as absolutely, Einstein had been acting crazily since his childhood. He wasn't considered a normal child, and yet he is the pioneer of science. We cannot study science without taking his name, and there are many more names that we can add to. Vincent van Gogh, Sylvia Plath, Virginia Woolf, so many of them, and countless others, all reaching new creative heights while struggling with a terrible mental disorder of some kind. So the question is that, is a mental disorder related to how creative you can be? Higher your mental disorder, higher your creativity? Does it have a proportionate relationship? Because we see so many examples around us where people who were very popular in their creativity suffered from mental disorders, that too terrible ones. So suffering from a mental disorder, does it make you more creative, or being creative makes you suffer from mental disorder. So the entire passage shows us a correlation between this word and this word. That's the article about. Read the page and send me a done when you're done. Maybe because they don't follow conventional methods of learning, could be. But Disha, when you go through the passage, you'll realize that it's not merely about they thinking out of the box. They genuinely suffered from mental disorders, scientifically proven ones. And that's what makes it even more, everyone more curious, that somebody who suffers genuinely from a scientifically claimed mental disorder, does it make you more creative? Now, I should have actually eliminated the title here and let you think what the author's opinion is. But now, since you've read the title, you know the author actually calls the correlation a myth. He says there's no correlation. And that's what the article talks about. But then next time, I think I'll do that. I'll remove the title so that you think about it. Okay. One more thing. See, since we're talking about art, we're talking about eras, we're talking about creativity, all these people, okay, specifically Vincent van Gogh is pretty popular, has been pretty popular for his art, rather a pioneer for his art. I would like you to do some homework, okay? Now, there's something called eclectic reading. Let's talk about eclectic reading a little. Let me take the opportunity here. Eclectic, good morning, everyone. Ma'am, mind being overactive makes them behave odd. Okay. All right. Preds, I buy your point. Back to the idea. Eclectic reading is reading from a variety of sources on a variety of topics so that you're comfortable with every topic that might come up in MBA entrance examinations. And art is one of those topics that's very frequently asked and people struggle with it. So let me give you a tiny bit of a homework. Okay. I want you to identify various eras pertaining to art, not eras pertaining to revolution of science or of business or of commerce, but revolutions and eras pertaining to art. So, because I have an example, the Romantic era, I want you to do some research about it. Sit with Wikipedia, okay, and do some research about Renaissance, Romantic era, and the various eras. You'll see an entire timeline of various eras. What this will do to you is you'll be comfortable with various names which are at least some alien names to us, because these are not the common Indian names, and a lot of people struggle when these names come up in articles on art. So if you wish to be comfortable with an article on art, we'll be doing that today. Do some research after the class, sit with Wikipedia and identify the various eras and the various popular names and how these eras were different from each other. That should be sufficient to make you a master of any article that might come up on art. I hope I make sense. Exactly, Harish. That's what eclectic reading is. Okay. All right. Exactly. Yes, Harish. So let's go on. He says, but. So we need to focus here. Till this point, he was basically trying to draw a correlation about the common belief today that we have, that there's a relationship between the two, that is your creativity and your mood disorder. And people commonly believe that there is a relationship between these two. But then he contradicts it here. He says, these things, specifically creativity and mood disorders, they are so naughty. Why does he call them naughty? He calls them naughty because they are so tightly interlinked. These two areas, no, not these. They have multiple layers. And to clearly identify a correlation between them is a very difficult and arduous job, which probably nobody has ever been able to do. So he calls them multi-layered, naughty, twisty and turvy, and you can't dwell deep into it because there are many layers here. Thus, The common belief that these two things are related probably is a myth that's been claimed by the author. It is not as straightforward as you see. Creativity is clearly related to mood disorders. We've got to dig deeper. So now, what's your anticipation? What would the next paragraph talk about? What would the next paragraph talk about? What's your anticipation? I'd like to know that from you. It's a very easy anticipation. Once you anticipate, you can skim through the next page very easily. Dia, you have to be quiet, okay? Because you've read this article already. Hi, Pranit. Good morning. What will the next paragraph talk about? Next page talk about, rather. Anybody? Think. It's easy. Anyone? Argument supporting the myth? Yeah. See, it's simple. When he says we've got to dwell deeper, that means he is going to dwell deeper. He is going to dig in deep. You know, why do I help you anticipation? Because anticipation will help you skim. It will also help you with the para completion questions. Para completion, how do I know what the last line will be about? The middle line, the first line be about? Usually the last one. Para completion questions are easily solved through anticipation. Okay? Exactly. So he's going to talk about research related to yes, Swahil. He's going to talk about examples on how both are related or unrelated rather, because he calls it a myth. So he's going to dig deeper. Read the next page, send me a done. Yes, Prats, a bit of delayed. Done? Now see, I've highlighted. Yeah, there will always be some lag, my child, because the moment I go live, it takes a few seconds for me to go live. Okay, and thus on YouTube, the lag will always be there. All right, so back to it. I hope you're done reading this. I've highlighted a few things. Why have I highlighted them? I've highlighted them because that's exactly what I want you to focus on while you're reading a page of this sort. A lot of people tell me while they solve RCs, they tell me, ma'am, I read the whole passage, but I don't get anything by the end of the article. Does this happen with you ever? You read the whole passage, but then you realize, no, I don't get anything. What is this whole paragraph talking about? This whole passage talking about? It's a bouncer to me. This happens with people who read mindlessly. A simple answer to that. Mindlessly is you're not paying attention to the details of the passage. You're reading it for the sake of reading it because it's there in front of you and you have to do it. It's there in the examination, so you have to solve it. And because there's this pressure of scoring high, you just read it for the sake of reading it. You can't be doing that. You have to pay attention to details of the sort that I have highlighted. That's the whole idea of attending these classes regularly, so you understand how somebody who teaches things, how somebody who makes papers pays attention to lines. This is exactly where questions can stem out of. Okay? So just don't read mindlessly. Please point out a few things and make a mind map in your head while you're reading, linking it to things. While I explain it, why do you get it? I get it, you get it, because there's a link that you've created with the previous page to this page. So mind mapping is very, very important for you to retain that information and get the gist of it. Okay. So please be regular and attend the classes regularly so that you get the hang of what to read, where to pay special focus on. Okay. Disha, that can easily be mastered, my child. That's not an issue. So the issue is the issue that you have is merely eliminating closed options. That can easily be mastered. This idea of reading the whole page and not getting anything, this will take time to master, okay? Friends, I'm sure you're reading from a variety of sources. You're pretty regular since the first day of my class. You're going to sail through it. So now see, he says it's a myth. Now he tries to dig deep into why this correlation happens in the mind of people, and he says it's merely a stereotype that people have in their head. Why stereotype? Because one reason he gives is movies, and the second reason he gives is examples around us. So he says somebody you see who's pretty depressed but writes good poetry, probably it's his solace to escape from depression, and he writes poetry, and you link, oh, because he's in depression, he writes good. So his creativity is linked to his mental disorder. And then the movies where they give you a typical example of a suffering artist and the mad genius. You know, when you come to the end of the article, your mind will be blown with an example the article gives. Stick with me, okay? Stick with me for your mind to be blown. So, movies are responsible for that, the examples around us, and we typically link these two things. And he clearly says that these are two unique things. Not everybody has them. Creativity and mental disorder. So people like you and I who, God willing, don't suffer from mental disorders, at least not the severe ones, and at least I am not very creative, I would link these two things very easily, and people around me would also do that. And since these are unique, you are bound to create this illusionary correlation in your head. But he calls it an illusion. So this is not data-based. This is not fact-based. He says this correlation that you're drawing is merely an illusion in your head. That means the author clearly says that there is no scientific evidence to support the fact that an artist is bound to be either mentally disturbed or vice versa. And that's exactly what's explained here as well. Okay. So he says because it's so common around us, we tend to buy this fact, but that's not true. Okay. Oh yes, rock star. How could we miss out on that? Okay. All right. So it happens with unfamiliar. No, ma'am, the meaning of availability heuristic. What did I tell you the meaning of heuristic? Riya says, Amrit, the availability of involving aid to learning, but just theoretically, not just theoretically, but practically. Exactly. So heuristic is an approach where you learn on the job, hands-on. And the availability heuristic is the availability of hands-on learning. You learn by practicing and not merely by theory. Okay. So the effect is compounded by the availability heuristic, wherein we judge how common something is by how easily it comes to our mind. So when we think about mad people, we clearly link it to what? Creativity, because we've seen that. So we can call it a heuristic approach here, and the availability of this approach is pretty high. Many examples around us. Did you get it, Amrit? Ma'am, why did he use stereotypes? It is used here for the mad and not the mad ones, right? And not the man and woman. Yeah, he calls it a stereotype because linking these two things is barely a stereotype that we've created in our head. What's a stereotype? A stereotype is this is how women are supposed to behave. This is how men are supposed to behave. This is how artists are supposed to behave. How are artists supposed to behave? Crazily. Inverted commas, mad. So it's a stereotype that we've created, and these movies and examples around us, they have fueled stereotypes. They have strengthened our idea of these stereotypes. Stereotypes aren't backed with logic, and that's why he uses the word stereotype. Okay? Exactly. Let's move on to the next page. Read the page, send me a done. I love how you are paying attention to minute details here. Read the page. Done? Answer one question. How many of you skimmed through this paragraph? Because if you didn't, you should have. How do I decide without reading the paragraph that I should have skimmed through it? Reading the first line. Till now, I understand the gist that the author denies the fact that there's any scientific correlation between the two ideas. The scientific study of creativity and mood disorder is limited. I know the next whole paragraph is going to explain this first line. That why is the scientific study limited? The first page told us that it's a multi-layered, knotty topic. And to understand it, it's very difficult because you can't dwell deep. So I know the whole paragraph is going to be explaining why is the scientific study of creativity and mood disorder limited in both the areas. And in both the areas, if the study is limited, we can't even correlate them properly. Very good, very good, very good, Praj. They are very good. Yes, Amrit, you should have skimmed through it. Okay, so nothing very important here in this whole paragraph. It is important to understand just how difficult it is to establish a connection with the scientific position. You know what? If you're still confused, if you left something important here or not, you can read the last line. It reiterates the same idea in the first line. That means the whole paragraph talks about the same thing, that it's difficult because the scientific evidence is limited. The scientific study is confined and thus we can't correlate these. That's exactly what the whole paragraph talks about. Let's move on to the next page, everyone. The rest is explanation, exactly. Next paragraph. No, not buffering, Rohit. Not buffering. This one. Be very careful with the first line. Ma'am, I'm starting to prepare for CAT, SNAP and CET. Now I'm in. Okay. So which course should I join now? Are you referring to the courses that we offer? KSP, I think the counselors will be better people to address the courses to you, and you'll have to call the counselors on the number that's given under the video in the scroll bar. But if I did not get your question, please rephrase it. Okay, now see, he says, he gives you another pointer of why correlating creativity and mental disorders is inappropriate. And this entire paragraph supports that reason. He says, if you understand the first line, you'll see this part is merely an explanation of that. He says, creativity researchers commonly define creativity as novel and useful. So that's what the scientific study says researchers use these two terms. One is novel and other is useful. So when a person who's creative creates something, it is unique and it is appropriate and useful. But can you measure uniqueness? Can you measure appropriateness of something? If that's a word at all. You cannot. And that's the whole point. You, since cannot measure these things, how will you even measure the creativity of a person? And if you cannot measure the creativity of a person, how will you link it to a mental disorder? So the study is pretty narrow and biased, he can say. Exactly. Yes. Also, there's another line that I had highlighted here, which will explain this whole paragraph for you. If we measure a person's creativity by asking them to write a poem, how beautifully, how effective the poem is, inferences shouldn't be made about that person's creative ability in science. That means creativity can also be multidimensional in terms of poems or art or paintings or science. Your creativity can be multidimensional. And since it can be multidimensional, you can't compare them. It has layers. Remember the first page? And delving deep into the layers will become a difficult task. That's exactly what the whole page mentions. I hope you get it. Yes? Let's move on to the next page and let me see if the next page needs reading. Just a minute. Yeah, read this. So in the previous page, the author addressed the difficulty in measuring creativity. Although today science is so advanced, it's not very difficult to measure mental disorders. But the author says it's difficult. I'll actually be in opposition to his view here, but we'll abide by his view. He says a mood disorder is not directly measurable. And the whole paragraph gives you reasons why it's difficult for you to measure mood disorders. Similarly, in the previous page, he said it's difficult to measure creativity. Ultimately, when it's difficult to measure both the things, the only correlation we draw between these two is by examples we see around us, and that's merely stereotype. This is how artists are supposed to behave. This is how women are supposed to behave. Men are supposed to behave. So we learn from our surroundings, can be heuristic, but is merely a stereotype. All right, let's move on to the next page. This paragraph, leave this one, read this paragraph. Throes are basically, that's the suffering that you go through. It's the, Amrit says, is throngs a synonym? Yes, you can mark it. So thronging is a kind of pain that you get, and that's similar to throes. Absolutely. Your suffering, your pain, your physical, mental pain. Yes, that's throes. So throngs is a related word to it. Done? All right. So it says, does it make you more creative? That's the first question that he tries to answer. And there are a couple of more questions that are answered later on in the paragraph. What did you infer here? What does the author believe? Does having a mood disorder make you more creative? Of course not, right? And he tries to explain that. Do individuals with a mood disorder exhibit greater creativity? We don't have studies about that. We don't have enough answers to it. There's another question that the author points out here. Do creative people have more mood disorders? What do you think will he answer without reading this paragraph? What do you think will he answer? Just make a guess. Don't read the paragraph. Make a guess. What will he answer here? You know it. If you've read the paragraph carefully, you know what he's going to answer. Okay, anyone? This lag is actually disturbing. Absolutely negative. He'll say, no, that's not true because the whole passage is written to support this idea that they aren't related. So he's going to say, no, they aren't related. Okay? No, Prads, you'll have to anticipate the whole paragraph. The whole passage is written to say that these two things are not related. That is mental disorder and creativity of people. It's hard to measure. Exactly. The previous 2 pages focused on the fact that it's difficult to measure. He'll reiterate the same idea. And this whole skimming is to tell you guys that when I promote Aeon articles, see, the length is supremely high, but you don't have to read everything in Aeon articles. It's an essay, and the entire article can never come up in the examination. So please don't be disturbed with the entire length of the passage when I ask you to read Aeon articles. Look at it, skim through it, but read, okay? There was another thing that I was discussing with a few of my colleagues. Would you like to see some articles from various books? Because I've been covering NYT and the Guardian and the Aeon for quite a while now. But if I look at the sources Cat takes up articles from, these would probably surmount to good 40-50% of the articles. The remaining 50% of the articles are usually from various books. Would you like me to take some articles from books and would you like to read those? I'd like to know your opinion here. Some extracts. There's a lag. And the first time I read an article on the Aeon, it took me 48 minutes to read it. You have to skim. That would be great. Okay. But isn't it going to be on the baseline that there is no defined criteria? Yes, of course. And so he's going to say they probably aren't related. It's only a stereotype. That's why people with mood disorders may or may not. Exactly, Prads. May or may not. So we can't say that they're linked. That's the whole idea of the entire article, okay? Okay, everyone says that would be great. Let me work on that. Okay. Now, look at this beautiful painting, okay? You know who the painter is. I'm sure you must have seen this very popular painting and many people trying to replicate the painting. That's Vincent van Gogh's painting, the Sunflower, okay? A very popular one, Sunflowers rather. Read this paragraph and tell me if it blew your mind and if you're convinced with the whole passage. I hope YouTube, yeah, Van Gogh, exactly. I hope YouTube doesn't sue me for plagiarism for copying and pasting this picture from the internet. Now, do you see the painting differently? Or do you see it the same way? I'd like to know that from you. That's a typical example of stereotyping. Students looking into his history and then making notions about why is he so creative. You know, when you look at Van Gogh's paintings, this is a very simple one. But when you delve deeper into his paintings, they are so dark. Some of them are, and some of them are disturbing as well. Very disturbing. You now know why they are, possibly because we fall for a stereotype. But is that a reason for he drawing or painting disturbing paintings? Could be, but probably not as well. Exactly. It does change the perception. Yes. I did not look at the painting the same way. So while you are doing some research about the various eras of art, please look for his paintings. And now that you know that he had done something terrible to himself, you look at his paintings in a different light now. But are these interconnected? We are not sure. This is a dangerous message for those engaged in creative pursuits and for those creators who do suffer from mood disorders. It could keep them from seeking treatment if they believe treatment would diminish their creative ability. How could I not mention the movie Rockstar again? He wanted to suffer to be more creative. And if somebody tells me that my mental disorder is going to make me more creative, I will probably never get myself treated because I want to keep my creativity alive. This is why a meticulous and a bias-free examination of creativity and its relation to mood disorder must be taken, because we need to improve the mental health of everyone and we need to remove the bias from the society and must be held to high scientific standards, because these standards right now are multi-layered and unclear. This is not an easy task. Your homework, my children. First, tell me what the summary is in not more than 10 words, everyone. What's the summary of this article? Do you see a conclusion being drawn in the end? If you see a conclusion being drawn in the end, you can very easily locate your main idea, because this conclusion is basically a gist of the whole passage that you've read. So please focus on the first and the last paragraphs, usually when you have lengthy passages, and see if there's a major conclusion drawn in the end. Oh, I haven't seen that movie, Abhilasha. What's the main idea, everyone? And by the time, did you like my session? If you haven't done that, please do that. Mental disorders must not be taken too seriously as a stem for creativity. Okay, yeah. But somehow I feel from my personal experience that extremes of any mood does affect the creativity. Okay. Disha, so you paint. And Disha, if this relationship is a common belief, probably somebody might not get themselves tested or treated for the mood disorder because you see that in your creativity, right? That's the whole idea, the author says. So, creativity and its correlation with mental disorder is dangerous. Amrit, I'll ask you to refrain from using these extreme words. Okay, the last paragraph though tells us that it can be dangerous, but the whole passage doesn't hint on to this extreme word. So if this word appears in one of the options, you have to eliminate this option. The whole passage focuses on telling us that we don't have ample of study to correlate these two things, and the study needs to be efficient so that if there's a correlation or not is figured out. That's a neutral one. Always choose options which are closest to the whole passage instead of one line or a word, okay? So that's the main theme here. Now your homework, writing down the tone under my video. That's what your homework is. Famous notion of people with mental disorder being more creative, as it's a general perception, and hence people for yeah, you can say that, Amrit. That's a better one. Exactly, that's a better one. All right, guys. So before I end my class, I hope you've liked the article that Dia suggested. I'll see you next on Tuesday with another article from either the NYT or the Guardian, or probably an extract from a book. I'll try to figure that out. Do like the session, do comment under the video, do share the session, do subscribe to our channel, follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Telegram, and download our app on Google Play. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a very, very good day. Okay, I have some more people telling me the tones. No, the gist. Mental disorders reflect more creativity. No, Ravi, no, my child. I think you joined me late. I want you to revisit the class. Okay? I'm sorry to say, but you've got the main theme wrong. The passage reflects the idea that linking creativity with mental disorder is a statement made without much research. Yes, Disha. Okay? Major foundation. Yes, agreed. All right, everyone. Have a very good weekend. Work very hard. Read a lot. Work on your vocab. I shall see you on Tuesday. Have a very good day. Bye, everyone. Okay, Karan has it. I need to read that. People tend to connect with words, quotes, writings, paintings, and music. A lot tend to create such art when they are on either extremes of their emotions. That's true, Karan. But that looks more like your opinion instead of the main idea. That is more of a part of the premise, okay, and not the gist. If you don't mention the scientific study into your gist, it's going to be partially true. I hope you get it. All right. Bye, everyone.